Welcome to Camp Pokémon! Have we got some fun stuff in store for you?
Look, I don't have any idea what's going on either. Camp Pokémon, not to be confused with Pokémon Camp, was yet another mobile game from our favorite franchise. Released in 2014, predating even Pokémon Go? This was weird. So what the actual heck happened? Well, yeah, this game was released very early compared to the rest of Pokemon's mobile games. And on top of that, it was only released in North America, Europe, and Australia, the predominantly English-speaking regions. It never came to Japan. And when you take a look at the gameplay, it becomes very apparent why. Without exaggeration, Camp Pokémon is a baby game for the iPad generation. Though that's not necessarily a bad thing. I normally wouldn't even talk about these super simple Pokemon games like this if it weren't for the fact that Camp Pokémon has since been delisted from the App Store, so that makes it a spooky removed game or something very nostalgic depending on who you are. I have some hazy memory of downloading and playing this game when it came out, but I of course don't remember all of the details, so let's take a bit of a dive into Camp Pokémon. First off, we're brought to this 3D island where we can enjoy a variety of locations and minigames. As listed on Bulbapedia, we have the cabin, photo booth, mystery cave, Pokemon theater, and camp news. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, being places to aggregate whatever collection you build, take and edit photos, watch more Pokemon stuff, and get news about Pokemon. Interesting that apparently the Pokemon Theater and Camp News are ways of giving you more Pokemon experiences through one place. Like, instead of just navigating to the Pokemon website to have links to the news and the Pokemon TV, it was all included in this one app. Though this was also around the time when they started to phase out the minigames from the Pokemon website and was also at the point where smartphones and tablets had become the definitive device for younger people. This is what makes me think that that's what Pokemon Camp was intended for, being presented as an app with fun games and ways to continue connecting and keeping up with Pokemon. It was probably seen as the perfect way to reach that younger audience. Honestly, not a terrible idea, but I expect that this was mostly a Western experiment that didn't pan out, even though it was apparently developed by Creatures Inc. But as we see with the Camp Counselor characters, their track record of weird human-looking characters remains unchallenged. Please just leave the character design to Game Freak. But aside from the usual features, there were a handful of minigames that served as the main draw. The first game is Find That Pokemon, where you move around a spyglass and attempt to scope out Pokemon in the surrounding area. And the presentation from this game carries over to most of the other games, where you have the global link artwork of Pokemon moving around in front of some sort of environment. Next is Pokeball Throw, which is a shooting gallery style game where you fling Pokeballs at Pokemon as they travel across the screen. There's also Pokemon Evolutions, where you're shown parts of a Pokemon evolution line and need to guess which Pokemon of the three options at the bottom is behind the question mark. I kind of like how this is a variation on the tried and true Who's That Pokemon guessing game, but redone in a new way that's still pretty easy as long as you know Pokemon, but still sort of challenging. It's pretty neat. Next is Pokemon in Focus, which shows you the shadow of a Pokemon that progressively comes into focus and you need to identify it based on the options presented to you. Wait a minute, this one is just straight up Who's That Pokemon. While technically different from the last game, there's still basically the same concept of guessing that Pokemon based on limited visual information. And sure, this game and the last game take place in different settings, though I feel like they're running out of ideas. The last game in the base version was Battle Matchups, where you're presented with Pokemon and have to choose one that has the best type matchup against it. Alright, so some more critical thinking is a good idea, though it seems pretty basic for what you could do for a Pokemon quiz, but it's good to have. In version 1.1 of the app, a new game was added, Pokémon TCG Match. Don't get too excited though, because instead of actually playing a match of Pokemon TCG, you instead match Pokemon TCG cards. Because this is a matching game, there's really no reason to include actual images of Pokemon cards, aside from advertising. Though bit of a side note, I find it interesting how I've been seeing alternate ways of playing with Pokemon cards as a means of introducing the concept to newcomers. That might be a topic I discuss in the future. And lastly, in version 1.3, the game Pokeball Roll was added, where you tilt your mobile device to roll a Pokeball, actually taking advantage of the device's hardware. Playing these minigames would earn you pins of the Pokemon you encountered, which were of course just the global link images reused. Depending on how quickly you completed the game, there were also badges to be obtained. Overall, looking back on gameplay footage, reading about it, and trying my darnest to remember my own experience, Camp Pokémon seemed like a fun little collection of minigames. As I said, I feel like this was meant to be a modernized or updated version of the activities that could be found on the Pokemon website. I definitely have my own memories of those old Flash games, even though they were really nothing special, so having something like that for another generation of Pokemon fans makes total sense. It's nothing that deep, but it was never meant to be. Though with it being a simple game that could be enjoyed offline, I don't really understand why it's no longer available to download. I guess there is the fact that it was actually a bit outdated. It was released during the era of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, as you can tell by the old logo, but it was updated during Generation 7. Though I think the major reason it was taken down was because they later released Pokemon Playhouse. This is technically a very different game when it comes to visuals and gameplay, but it was still meant for the same demographic, younger Pokemon fans whose primary form of gaming was an iPad. Having both of these on the App Store at the same time could potentially cause confusion for parents or children, and as a result, both games might have seen fewer downloads having to share the spotlight. Clearly, Pokemon doesn't intend to ever completely stop reaching the younger player base, but as we've seen with digital download games, they're only available for a limited time or in limited regions. So if it weren't for the fact that these games were documented when they were around, they would be basically completely gone. So let me know if you've ever played, let alone even heard of this game ever before. Anyway, I'd say it's about time to gather around the campfire for one last song as we say goodbye to Camp Pokemon. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, especially the great Gators, Brandon Mork, Cheeseburger Lasers, Gavnuts, Justin R, Cosmo Zero, Michaela, Quago, Volity, and Pastel Blood. If you would like to support, get your name shouted out here, as well as access to emotes for comments and live streams, as well as early videos, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter as well for more memes, but anyway, this has been GatorEX, I'll catch you all later.
The new Pokemon Carry Case Volcano playset lets you explore more of the world of Pokemon, reveal wild Pokemon in the dark cave, and train your Pokemon with battle launchers. Make the volcano erupt, but watch out for falling folders. Pokemon Carry Case Volcano playset from Jazzwares. Other figures sold separately.